Welcome everybody, IAmAMusicNerd here. It's another Monday, which means it's time for another tier list. This time I'm going to be going over Jay-Z's discography. Now, Jay-Z, one of the most successful hip-hop artists of all time. Some would even say the greatest pure lyricist of all time. You know, Jay-Z, his discography I would put up against probably any other musician in music history. I mean, it's a discography that's had very few missteps, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of go over all these albums and see which ones would go on this tier list. Now, I'm not going to be talking about his collaboration albums, Watch the Throne, the Linkin Park album he did, that R. Kelly album that, Jay-Z's Mind Never Happened. Let's get into it. Alright, the first album, Reasonable Doubt, came out in 1996, and in my opinion, this is going in the S tier. This is probably Jay-Z's best album. It's my favorite Jay-Z album, even after all this time. This came at a time where New York hip-hop was just, the competition was insane. You know, Mobb Deep, Wu-Tang Clan, Nas, of course, Biggie Smalls was still alive. And, of course, Biggie Smalls has a feature on this album, Brooklyn's Finest, which is one of my favorite Jay-Z songs of all time. The genre mafioso rap was very popular. You had artists such as Raekwon, he beat for Cuban Links, Nas, It Was Written, had these rappers doing these mafioso personas, like in the mob movies, and Jay-Z copied that formula here, but he used it as an allegory for his own life as a, drug dealer from the streets trying to rise to become this top tier criminal. Certainly this is a topic that he will explore on future albums, but when he did it here, it was very fresh, and you really were getting the sense that this was a new voice in hip-hop. There's lots of great songs here. The Evils, Dead Presidents, which samples a Nas song. One of those albums that I think is going to stand the test of time in music. It's one of the best hip-hop albums of all time. In My Lifetime Volume 1 came out a year later. Now, Reasonable Doubt, when it came out, wasn't very successful. It only charted at number 23 at the Billboard 200. And this saw Jay-Z trying to follow more commercial sound. So he had, P. Diddy, who was at the time the biggest hip-hop producer in the world, come in and do some of these songs. And yeah, some of these songs do sound kind of polished, sound a little too radio friendly. That song Sunshine, it's in the video, it's just it's way too much. There are some very good songs here as well. Where I'm From shows Jay-Z kind of like doing one of his many tributes to Growing Up in the Marcy Projects. I think it's a fine album. It's very uneven. There's some good songs, there's some okay songs, but it's not atrocious. It's just not up to the quality of some of his best albums. So Jay-Z's third album, Volume 2, came out a year later, and this would be his first ever #1 album, which would be a streak that he would follow throughout the rest of his career. And we all know why this album got big. It was that damn Annie sample. It's a hard knock day, but I remember hearing that song for the first time and was just like, what the hell is this? And it has ended up being one of my favorite Jay-Z songs ever. It's such a, catchy ass hook, and Jay-Z smartly using the allegory of Annie being an orphan, come from the streets, and using that for his own life. And so it was one of those things that Jay-Z did. He took a risk, and it definitely paid off and won him a Grammy for this album. Now, this album kind of continues along the similar lineage of Volume 1. You're going to have your street songs, but you're also going to have your commercial songs like the Annie song. You're going to have your club-friendly songs. So, I think it's a little bit better than Volume 1, but not up to the par to Reasonable Doubt. I just think that it saw Jay-Z just trying to appease all audiences. There are some great songs here. Reservoir Dogs, Can I Get a, Money Cash Hoes. And so, there are some songs I can play here that don't annoy me. Then there's also like the purely commercial songs that, you know, you just kind of like, they're just like middle tier. So I'm gonna put this in the B tier, a slight step up from Volume 1. Alright, next one, Volume 3. Now, this one, I felt Jay-Z was going back to the hardcore production that he did on Reasonable Doubt. You know, not as humorous, you know, kind of Jay-Z just getting to the meat and potatoes of, you know, I'm just gonna put out dope lyrics, hardcore production, and that's it. So it's really very lean, and you know, of course, the big song here, Big Pimpin', which kind of showed Jay-Z stretching out, doing a little bit more of that southern sound that started to get very popular. Jay-Z just, you know, sticking to what he knows best, but also just stretching out just a little bit. I think it's a fine album. I'm gonna put it in the B tier. It's an underrated album. I think it's an album that not a lot of people talk about when they talk about discography. The Dynasty, Rock La Familia. Now this was more of a showcase for his label, you know, label mates, Rockefeller, guys like Beanie Siegel were getting a lot more exposure here. The Neptunes was a rising production squad that, of course, produced some of the songs here. Give It To Me. I think historically, this album is important because it showcased Jay-Z, you know, working less with DJ Premier, who his collaborator in the 90s, and now he was working with the Neptunes. He's working with a young Just Blaze and Kanye West, and featuring more of the soul sampling that would become very popular in the 2000s. And of course, he would take it to the next level on his next album. But to me, this album is more of a contemplation album. It's not really a showcase for Jay-Z and his talents. It's more of like everybody gets to eat. It's like a big Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody eats. Everybody gets some features here and there. So I think it's okay. I put it in the C tier. The next album, The Blueprint. It's one of Jay-Z's most talked about albums of his career. Now, this album actually came out September 11th, 2001. Given the fact that it sold so well that week, I think it sold like 500,000 copies his first week, showcased how popular Jay-Z was, especially at this time. This really was a turning point for hip-hop, because at the time, you know, that Timberland spacey keyboard driven sound was very popular in hip-hop production, and because of Kanye West and Just Blaze and their work here, you know, hip-hop featured more of a soul-centric, you know, sampling became popular again. And certainly, you know, we all know Kanye West's production style. He's a very sample-heavy producer, and so a lot of samples here, Jackson 5, David Bowie, you know, were pricey, but were used in such a incredible fashion that people just couldn't deny how important samples were. So that's what Blueprint did for hip-hop. On the other hand, you know, it really established Jay-Z as the top rapper in the game. You know, a lot of his contemporaries in the 90s were kind of going through some, you know, transitional periods. You know, Nas, obviously, this album is famous for Jay-Z's Takeover song, which pretty much was a blow to Nas's career until he came back with Ether. But, you know, the album also features a great Eminem verse, Renegade, which people have debated that he is actually better on the song than Jay-Z. Yeah, like the songs that you love are the songs that I love, you know, H to the Izzo, Hola, Halvito, Girls, Girls, Girls. Just a phenomenal album, front to back. I'm going to put in the S tier. Alright, the next one, The Blueprint 2, The Gift and the Curse. So this is more of a double album. I think it's his longest album of his career. And of course, you know, the first one works so well, so why not do the sequel? And, you know, Jay-Z kind of doing all these different sounds. You know, he did kind of the southern sound, working with Big Boy, Killer Mike. He did, you know, the hardcore sound, working with Lenny Kravitz. He did the stole stuff that he did with The Blueprint. So Jay-Z all over the place, and while the lyricism, the production is nice, it is very overloaded. There is a lot of filler. Of course, with most double albums, you're gonna get some filler, but as far as rap double albums go, this is one of the better ones. I think Jay-Z's personality just runs through this album. Of course, he would have some of the popular songs, the Bonnie and Clyde song that he would work with Beyonce. Obviously, that was the beginning of their relationship on a professional level and on a personal level. But I remember wearing this album out when I was a kid. It's one of the first albums I ever bought when I was a kid. Just playing all these songs, and it was great because it was a double album. More songs, the merrier. And but as I listen to it now, some of it does sound a little bit dated, but I think it's a solid album. I'm gonna put it in the B tier, more like B minus, C plus. Alright, the next album, the Black Album. Now this was Jay-Z's so-called retirement album, which we all know how bullshit that would be, because literally the next year he'd just be doing verses, and then 3 years later he'd come back with another studio album. So at the time, people did think that this was the last of Jay-Z, and I think he went out to prove that if I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out on top and feature some of the best songs and lyrics of his career. Encore, Change Clothes, of course 99 Problems, but Bitch Ain't One's one of the best songs of his career, working with Rick Rubin. I think this is an overall strong album. It's one of my favorite Jay-Z albums. I think Jay-Z realized that he, at this point, is an elder statesman in hip-hop, and it really was kind of a transitional point in hip-hop. 50 Cent was becoming popular, Eminem was going on hiatus, Kanye was just coming around the corner, so Jay-Z figured, this is a good time for me to bow out, let the new kings rise up and take over the game. I think it's a solid album. I'm gonna put it in the A tier. Not quite as classic as Reasonable Doubt and The Blueprint, but I still think it's one of his best. Alright, so Jay-Z coming back from his retirement with Kingdom Come, starting the second wind of his career. Jay-Z obviously has transcended the hip-hop game and has now become an American icon at this point. And really with this album, he become, Jay-Z, the businessman, and, married to Beyonce and such. But with Kingdom Come, I felt featured kind of a rusty Jay-Z. The lyrics, of course, really aren't as on point as it was on the Black Album, the Blueprint. The production was very weak as well, very pop friendly. Show Me What You Got was his big comeback single, but it wasn't really like Jay-Z, lyrically at a strong point. He does have some great songs here. The song Minority Report, which tackles the Hurricane Katrina, showed Jay-Z as most vulnerable, as most somber, and it will also show Jay-Z becoming more politically aware, talking on more topics that were affecting the black community, which is something that he will continue. Kingdom Come is not one of my favorites. It's not an album that I go back to as often. I'm going to put it in the D tier. So with American Gangster, I think this is when Jay-Z truly returned to form. After the weak reception of Kingdom Come, I think Jay-Z took it upon himself to say, alright, I gotta switch it up and do something a little different. So American Gangster, to me, going back to the themes of his debut album Reasonable Doubt, but with more refined production, more maturity, and I think that using the film American Gangster, which takes place in the 70s, was a smart move here because it influenced a lot of the production, which is a lot of 70s soul, funk, and yeah, I think Jay-Z comes here with a better album lyrically. I think where Jay-Z was at his life, him going legit, so to say, definitely a correlation to a criminal going legit now and becoming a refined businessman. I'm gonna put it in the B tier. It's not quite as good as his classic albums, but I thought it was a great bounce back from Kingdom Come. So now we have Blueprint 3, which is the last of the Blueprint trilogy. And to me, we're coming to a point in Jay-Z's discography where I wasn't really that much of a fan. I felt like Jay-Z was kind of chasing trends. You know, hip hop was going through a big sea change. You know, Kanye was coming with his 808s and Heartbreak period. Drake was popular around this time, or starting to be really popular. So Jay-Z felt like he had to keep up with the kids, so to say. And I feel like although some of the songs on this album were some of the most successful of his entire career, Empire State of Mind, Run This Town, Young Forever, to me, it's one of the more polarizing albums. It's not an album that I return to as much. I just felt like he leaned too heavily on the pop sound. And yes, Jay-Z does do that, but it became evident that Jay-Z was trying to, you know, in my metaphor, trying to be the old man in the young club, you know, trying to pick up girls that are like half his age. There's songs like DOA, which I love, but then songs like On to the Next One that I just feel are just kind of flat and don't really hold up as much. So Blueprint 3, I'm going to put in the C tier. To me, it's fairly average. Then we have Magna Carta Holy Grail, which to me is one of Jay-Z's worst albums. At least Blueprint 3, it's respectable. You know, it does have its audience, but Magna Carta, to me, Jay-Z was just lyrically, it felt like he was running out of things to say. The whole angle of Jay-Z saying, I got a lot of money, I'm married to Beyonce now, I collect all this art, but it just felt like, I don't really care. And of course, like I said, Blueprint 3, he was trying to chase trends, and it wasn't any more evident than on this album, you know, doing a lot of the trappy sounds. Hey, I'm gonna do this song with Rick Ross, and he just sounds out of his element. He sounds lazy. He sounds like he didn't want to make this album. You know, I remember the build up to this album where the Samsung thing, and of course people downloading it, and he got 1 million his first week. And to me, it just seems like a promotional ploy. When the best song on the album is 56 seconds, you know, that Beach is Better, that should tell you a lot, shouldn't it? And by the time it got to when he says twerk, Molly twerk, you sound like the old guy in the club. It's happening. It's happening. So yeah, Magna Carta, it's a D. Production is on point, I will say. Pharrell, Timbaland, they're always going to do their thing, but I think the weakest part, ironically, Jay-Z himself. I think the lyrics are just kind of weak. Alright, and then we're talking about his latest album, 444, which came out in 2017. So, Magna Carta, while it did great commercially, a lot of critics didn't like it, and it became a forgettable Jay-Z album, which for, you know, Jay-Z albums, they stick with you. The lyrics, the production, like every album has at least one Jay-Z song that like everybody remembers, but with Magna Carta, it just fell by the wayside. And I think Jay-Z, between 2013 2017, a lot had happened with Jay-Z's life and the country. You know, we were going from the era of Obama to the era of Trump. Jay-Z had some things he had to work on in his personal relationship with Beyonce, you know, the infidelity stuff that had gone on. And to me, Jay-Z showcasing him as most vulnerable, him as most introspective, and kind of pulling back the veil of, you know, hey, I'm Jay-Z, I'm the shit, and kind of saying, no, maybe I don't have everything all figured out. It's a very lean album, only 10 songs, one producer, No ID did a phenomenal job on this album, and I think it's Jay-Z kind of going back to basics. One of Jay-Z's more serious albums. You don't really hear a lot of the braggadocio and the wittiness that you would hear on a lot of Jay-Z albums. Jay-Z's kind of tackling a lot more serious issues, especially becoming more politically aware, talking about stuff that's plaguing the black community, talking about, you know, how he needs to be a better man, you know, being a better father, stuff that you don't really typically hear on a lot of Jay-Z tracks. And so it was kind of, it took a while for me to kind of, not gonna lie, it really took me aback, and I was very impressed that he took this approach, and this is a huge step up to me. I think this is his best album since American Gangster. I'm gonna put this in the B tier. I know when it came out, people were like, oh man, Jay-Z's back, you know, he's phenomenal. If you kind of compare this to like Scorsese crime movies, like 444 is basically The Irishman. You know, it's good, it's solid, but it's not like Mean Streets, it's not like Goodfellas. You know, it's a respectable piece of art, and I think as time will go on, it will show to be one of Jay-Z's better albums. So that's it. We have finally done it. Jay-Z's studio albums tier list. So thank you for watching this video. If you like the content, please hit the like button down below. Please hit the subscribe button down below. YouTube recommends these 2 videos to check out after this one. As always, until next time, guys, peace.